We didn't get hired by the rumor mill. We got hired by Sandy Smith. She lost her son 8 years ago, and she was told after a limited investigation that she was to accept that her son was killed in a hit and run accident, when none of the physical evidence seems to point to that conclusion. So this is not the Buster Murdaugh investigation. That is not our purpose here. This is the Stephen Smith investigation.
And the walls continue to cave in on the Murdaugh family. This time, though, the spotlight is on the eldest son, Buster Murdaugh, the son of convicted murderer Alec Murdaugh. Buster released a statement on Monday over the suspicious death of his former classmate, a young man named Stephen Smith. Buster has been linked to Stephen's death for nearly 8 years by rumors. Not by evidence, but by rumors and some documentaries that have aired on HBO and Netflix and others. This statement reads in part, and this is Buster's statement, "These are baseless rumors of my involvement with Stephen and his death are false. I unequivocally deny any involvement in his death, and my heart goes out to the Smith family. I am requesting the media immediately stop publishing these defamatory comments and rumors about me." This remains, though. Stephen's death is mysterious, and it is one of several deaths that somehow tie back to the Murdaugh family. Smith's family is hoping to exhume his body now and conduct a more thorough investigation into his death after being unsatisfied with the state police's conclusion that it was an alleged hit and run. Back to the rumors, though. It has been swirling and swirling, and this case got a second look after the death of Maggie and Paul was being investigated. They decided to give Stephen's case another look. And you're looking at all the other cases, the complicated web of cases involved with the Murdaugh family. Paul was driving the boat where Mallory Beach was killed. Gloria Satterfield was the attorney for the Murdaugh family, died after falling on the stairs of their home. And you see Stephen on the left. Those all in addition to the deaths of Paul and Maggie, which Alec Murdaugh was found guilty and will serve 2 consecutive life sentences. You get all that? It's a lot to take in, and it's very tragic. Brian Claypool is a trial attorney. He's a legal analyst. He is with us this morning. It is complicated. It is sad. All of these deaths linked back to this family. Buster now denying any involvement, and we should point out this is the first time he's spoken publicly about any of it, claiming his innocence and no involvement in the death of Stephen Smith. So let's start there. The evidence that led Stephen Smith's case to be reopened, re-examined. Attorney representing the family says they want to exhume the body. They essentially want to start this investigation over. How challenging will that be 8 years later?
Hey, Marnie, great to be back with you. I mean, it's very unusual to have a body exhumed, especially 8 years after the person dies. But what you can gather from a body that's 8 years old, I did a little research on this. If a body is under 10 years old, you still have soft tissue that can be examined. You've still got bones around the skull because Stephen Smith had a head injury. You can also analyze that. So one thing that you might be able to glean from exhuming Stephen Smith's body is the cause of his death, right? Because it was reported that it was through a hit and run car accident. If that happened, one would expect, for example, bruising in the legs or the ankles or even the torso if a car hits you, and possibly broken bones, not just a head injury. So I think there's a good basis to exhume his body to find out the cause of death, but I think it's going to be a big jump and leap to try to link this death somehow to Buster and or Alex Murdaugh.
What do you make of the fact of Buster responding to this? Does it surprise you? Does it add fuel to the fire for the family? What do you make of the timing?
No, not at all, Marnie. I think Buster's doing the right thing. If he believes that he had absolutely nothing to do with Stephen Smith's death, he's grieving the death of his mom and his brother. I would step out and do the same thing and set the record straight and start letting people know and media outlets know that if you suggest that I killed Stephen Smith, I'm coming after you, because you've got to have evidence to link Stephen Smith's death to Buster, right? And I think the only way you're going to be able to do that is if, for example, there's some DNA of Stephen Smith on some type of object, a hammer, a piece of wood, something at the Murdaugh home that was found during the investigation of Murdaugh's wife and son. I mean, absent that, and we don't even know if that's the case, right? So he's got to stand up for himself, because I think it's the opposite. If he sits back and says nothing, in the criminal world, that's kind of like an implied admission that you did it. If somebody says you did something really bad and you don't say anything, people are going to think you did it.
Right, but he's never said anything about any of the other cases. I mean, his dad was on trial for killing his mom and his brother. So it is curious. He throws out the defamation term, which people will go, okay, wait a second. But if you say he says this, but then let's analyze this. I was watching Chris Cuomo last night, and he made the point. It doesn't hold a lot of water, right? You can make the allegations and you can give his response, but you can still talk about the case, the evidence, and some of the concerns made in the investigation, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Marty. I mean, that's the First Amendment. I mean, you can talk about, we need to exhume the body. We need to look for evidence. We need to look to see if evidence links to Buster and or his dad. So absolutely. But that's different than saying, for example, I'm sure that Buster killed Stephen Smith. I mean, that's a big leap. And that is, potentially defamatory. One other thing I wanted to note, though, I think the body they need to be taking a look at is Gloria Satterfield, right? Because you and I talked about it during the Murdaugh trial, means, opportunity, motive, right? There really doesn't seem to be any related to Buster and Stephen Smith. Like, at least I haven't heard anything. But look, as to Gloria Satterfield, I mean, as I recall, I think Alex Murdaugh, for example, represented family members and actually, received a fee recovery resulting from Satterfield's death. So, and I think that's underway. That might be happening as well.
Well, the thing about it, Brian, and you and I both know this, is the man at the middle of it is behind bars, Alec Murdaugh. And when you talk about the Satterfield case, but you also talk about the Stephen Smith case, there are allegations. I believe there were pictures, if I'm not mistaken, of him and his brother showing up at the scene of the hit and run in 2015, where Stephen was found in the middle of the road. The question being, why is Alec Murdaugh and his brother at this scene of what happened? At the time, they didn't even think it was a crime. What puts them there, right? How all of a sudden is this family once again connected to a death? Won't that be a question that investigators have to answer?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think Murdaugh's brother, or it might have tried to sign on a family member of Stephen Smith for a potential legal case. I mean, the optics of that look awful, right? You're showing up at the scene of somebody who's died and you're trying to get a case. But you're right, that does show a link. Why is the Murdaugh family there? Do they have any involvement? So I think that does trigger some suspicion that either Buster and or his dad might be involved because of what you and I just saw for 6 weeks, this horrific murder trial involving, Maggie and her son. But again, that said, you've got to find some evidence, though, from the body being exhumed to link either Buster and or his dad to the death of Stephen Smith. And look, that's going to be challenging given that the body's been decaying for 8 years.
Right. And maybe not Buster, because Buster denies it, and maybe not Alec, who is behind bars and won't talk about it. But somebody knows something. That's the argument from the Smith family attorney. And you look at this crime scene, the evidence that we do have, and this is in images we can see, it doesn't pass the smell test. The way that his body was laying in the road, the injuries to his head and body just didn't match up with the hit and run. Even this fact, and it was really chilling, his shoes were loosely tied, Brian, but they did not get flung off of his feet. If he was hit by a car, those types of things, his cell phone in his pocket, would have been misplaced. They would have been somewhere else. It just doesn't add up, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, Marty. And I think another point where it doesn't add up is where did Stephen Smith's car, where was his car, right? He ran out of gas. His car, relative to where his body was found, suggests to me that somebody killed him, when he was waiting at his car where he ran out of gas, killed him there, and then transported him, right? Drove him in their car and dropped him off at another location. That's what it looks like to me. And I think that does warrant his body being exhumed, because potentially there might be some DNA then in a car that transported the body, if that in fact happened. And look, Marty, this Murdaugh case with a horrific murder of his wife and son, I mean, I think it warrants the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division looking really closely, not only at Stephen Smith's death, but Gloria's death and anybody else where there's an open case involving a murder, I mean, I think it warrants taking a look at, the Murdaugh family.
Right. And Stephen Smith, this case demands justice. His family will continue to pursue that, and we will stay on it as well. Brian Claypool, as always, appreciate your perspective. Good to see you. Make sure you tune in to Primetime tonight. More on the Stephen Smith case.